It's an old partnership. Mickey and I started out the first time many, many years ago. We've had a lot of our dreams come true. Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream. That's it, right here. Disneyland. Seen from about 2,000 feet in the air and 10 months away. I want to tell you about it because later on in the show you'll find that Disneyland the place and Disneyland the TV show are all part of the same. Now on a site of 240 acres near the city of Anaheim in Southern California, right about in here, we've begun to build Disneyland the place. We hope that it will be unlike anything else on this earth. Fair, amusement park, an exhibition, a city from the Arabian Nights, metropolis from the future. In fact, a place of hopes and dreams, facts and fancy, all in one.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome author and Disney historian, Jeff Kurti.
Stay awake. Been a long weekend and a fun weekend, and I think that's what we're going to have here right now. We're going to get to know something about this book. How many of you have the book? There's a lot of stuff about the book that is not in the book, so we've got some authorities and experts here to help us talk about maps as an art form or a storytelling device, and how they let us into these created places that we have at Disney and support storytelling and decorate walls and all of the ways that we use maps just beyond simple wayfinding. So I'd like to introduce a few experts that are going to help us here. Vanessa Hunt curated all of the artwork that's in the maps of the Disney parks. She's an Imagineer. A lifelong Disney aficionado. That's what I meant. She's part of the group at the Disney Art Library that's responsible for about 130,000 pieces of original artwork that are stored there and preserved at the Imagineering Art Library. She's been a curator of exhibits at Walt Disney Imagineering and utilizing those works of art from the collection. She was a consultant on the Walt Disney Family Museum, and she's the co-author of the Disney Attraction poster book. So you probably already have that one too if you're a good Disney fan. She's currently designing a new book featuring the work of Mark Davis. I think you probably might have seen Chris Merritt's and Pete Docter talking about that. And she's working with me on a monorails book for next year. So please welcome Vanessa Hunt. Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired.
Me too. Me too.
There'll be no napping during this, though.
That's not what I was promised.
Well, we brought somebody else in. Well, you can nap if you want. We'll talk about you. We brought somebody else who has a little bit of experience with art and Walt Disney Imagineering. Our co-panel today is, he was a student at UCLA and the editor of the Daily Bruin newspaper when he was recruited to create an 1890s themed newspaper, the Disneyland News, a month before the park opened. And then when he graduated UCLA, he joined Disneyland in '56, and he held responsibility for most of the park's publicity and marketing materials. He's done some other stuff since then. He was the Vice President of Creative Development, Executive Vice President, and then President of Walt Disney Imagineering for 9 years. And he supervised the design and construction of Tokyo Disneyland, and the Disney MGM Studios, and Disneyland, and Animal Kingdom. Every park you can think of. Marty is actually the only person who's been at the opening of every Disney park. So that's pretty cool. and most recently with Hong Kong and Shanghai, and he was named a Disney legend in 2001. So let's bring on Marty Sklar. Of course, on a personal note, I worked at Imagineering many years ago, and Marty pushed me relentlessly to write. So I owe a big chunk of my Disney career to Marty putting me on assignments to write things and sending things back with fearsome red flare pen. I know it's all over them, which I learned to appreciate after a few years.
I hope I made enough red pencil marks for you.
It was terrifying, but it got me through. I know how to work with good editors now. So we're here just to talk about the Maps book project, but more so about maps in general, maps and how we react to them and how we use them. Vanessa and I were talking a little bit about I remember the first book I ever bought was The Phantom Toll Booth by Norton Juster, and you opened it and the end papers were a map of the lands beyond, Dictionopolis and Digitopolis, and the idea that maps are this sort of communicative device that we use on so many levels, and with Disney, since the beginning of Disneyland. So the clip we saw was Walt, of course, on the very first episode of the Disneyland TV program, and he was showing this piece. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Peter Ellenshaw.
This is one of my favorite pieces in our collection, actually. I work in the Imagineering Art Library, so we house all the original artwork, so I get to see this almost every day, which I still have to pinch myself about. But
Do you get spoiled?
a little bit, yeah. Peter actually painted this. This is on a storyboard. This is what the animators or story artists at animation use to pin their story sketches to.
You'll know what a storyboard is. It's about a 4x8 corkboard. It's like a sound editing board.
Not a good substrate for artwork.
Yeah. Has that made it hard to preserve? You've had it restored.
It's gone through conservation, so it's pretty bomb-proof right now. Nothing's going to happen to it. But it's something that was probably needed pretty quickly to be on set, so Peter probably wasn't given a lot of time to paint it. His office was in the old animation building, so these were probably plentiful. They were very large and already framed. They have a gorgeous wood frame around them, so presentation ready.
Marty, do you remember this piece?
Well, of course, it was the second one. The first one, I think, is your next slide. It's Herb Ryman, the original drawing of Disneyland done over a weekend, literally. And Herbie loved telling the story about how Walt called him on a Friday and said, Roy has to take the drawing to Disneyland to New York on Monday. And Herbie said, oh, I'd love to see them. And Walt said, you don't understand, you're going to do them. And it was a true story because that drawing was done on a Saturday and Sunday of 1953. You probably remember that recently there was a fake drawing that was sold for $400,000 or something, which was not the original drawing of Disneyland. This is it. And it was done in a pencil. And Herbie had a note on it that said, this is the drawing that Roy took to New York to raise the $17 million to fund Disneyland.
Well, now that was another thing. Not that we were the slightest bit vexed about the sale of the original Disneyland map that was in every newspaper and all of that. As Marty said, it was not the original map. That's the original map. You didn't sell it.
No, we still have it. We're keeping that forever.
Okay. Just forever.
Just forever.
But it was created as a sales tool. It was created to present Disneyland to investors and participants and lessees. And so what it was done in pencil on a translucent paper so that prints could be made from it. So what you saw for sale was actually something like this.
closer to
And
that.
we've seen many of these over the years. There were a bunch of these done, as I remember.
Yeah, these were what you call the brown line, basically, and it has a color wash on it. And I think every one of them, every art director for different parts of the park was given one to use in the field, and that's probably what ended up being sold at that auction. But the key thing about this is and I once made a speech in Kansas City and had an hour to sit by myself, and I just went over this inch by inch in that hour. There's so many things that were done, that were in this drawing that didn't get built in Disneyland until year 5 or year 6. It was all in Walt's head and came out in Herbie's wrist, you know. And it is an amazing piece and kind of set the standard, I think, for some of the fun maps that we're going to talk about, because there's so much little business in there, like circus things and animals that you never in something this size you'd never see. But if you go and look at it inch by inch, it's all there. It's just amazing how these artists that we're going to be talking about put in so much detail that made them fun, made them something you could see yourself going in these places, which is part of the game, I think.
I think that's part of the joy of maps too. It's like the little storytelling devices all their own. And it's like Marty said, you look down into the depth. I'm lucky because I get to go visit Vanessa and I get to look at that Herbie Ryman pencil drawing. And you can spend hours looking at all of the things that meticulous, people that are in there, people in activities and so on. And I think that's where the fun of maps is. When you're a kid, you can look at maps for hours and sort of imagine yourself being there in these places.
We still find new things when we look at that art. There's just so many scenes happening in it. And we actually just discovered his initials are hidden in there not too long ago.
Oh, that was they didn't sign them back then.
No, they didn't.
You came in. Actually, the art library had them come back and sign a lot of stuff so that they could.
Yeah, in the early days, none of the art for Disneyland was signed. I guess there were a few occasional ones, but it was it wasn't until probably the 70s or or 80s even that the artists started signing their work. And I think it was because it really represents not one person's work, even though the artwork might be, but it's really a collaboration as Imaginary works with a whole team effort. So I think there was thought, well, there's a whole team of people working on this. Why should one of them be signing the illustration for the whole project?
Now, how many of you have or had or still have your Disneyland fun map or Walt Disney World? Or oh, you got to get on eBay, guys. My uncle gave me a 1958 Disneyland fun map when I was about 7, which I still have. And talk about getting lost and going in and studying. This was like studying the World Atlas before a trip. I didn't go to Disneyland probably for another 10 years. But I knew where absolutely everything was.
You were prepared.
In 1958. But when I went there in 1970, it was a little different. But the fun map is something that there were a lot of map works in like in the 30s. You could buy Hollywood star maps or geographic maps. People were doing a lot more traveling on the road, and the vernacular of the map became a much more commonplace thing as people became mobile in automobiles. So these style of fun maps became a fairly common means of very often promotional. Atlantic Richfield and different gas chains would do maps like this of different regions and cities. But this map is, well, this one's interesting because I don't think I even saw this until you put it in this show.
This is not in the book.
This is not in the book.
And this is actually, we don't have the original pencil on it. I'm not sure if that's because it went to the vendor who produced the actual fun maps. But this is a photograph of Sam's original pencil.
I didn't take it.
And more than anything, Walt wanted to communicate about the park because we all forget now that Disneyland, even though Walt was on television talking about it, it wasn't it wasn't perfectly known by everybody in the country and everybody in the world like they'd come to this event. And I remember, in fact, I wrote about it in my Dream and Do It book, that it was about the same time, 1958, I accompanied the merchandise people to Walt's office because the souvenir guide that we were doing at the time, which I was writing, was being sold for 25 cents, and it was costing 24 cents with all the handling and printing and everything to produce it. And they wanted to raise the price to 50 cents. So we went to Walt. In those days, you had to go to Walt for something as simple as that. And so we did. And they made their pitch, and Walt said no. And they said, Walt, in a year from now, it's going to cost us more to print and sell, etc., than we're making on it. And he says, you don't understand. I don't want that book on the coffee table of every guest who comes to Disneyland. I want them to take it home and show their friends what Disneyland is all about. And he says, they'll come back. And when they come back to Disneyland, that's when they're going to pay for coming to Disneyland. But why should we make another quarter on that one item? So he understood that many of these items were done to communicate what he wanted to do in the future, how he wanted people to think about the park, and to see them as fun. Like, this is called a fun map of Disneyland because that's what it is. It's a lot of fun to look at and see all the detail in it. And Sam McKim, of course, was the king of detail, and not just the fun maps. Sam created the fun map, but everything that we did, you'd always find all this detail, and that was in the drawings that Sam did about the projects we were working on.
Well, and Sam was an interesting guy. He was a multi-talented artist, all kinds of media, but once again, I think that he had this sense of what the whole experience was. He had just so much way of infusing his artwork. I still remember he did all of this story art. Lincoln was not ready at the time before the fair, so they took the audio tracks, and Sam did just a bunch of really sort of loose, fantastic color story sketches. But it's just amazing the sense of emotion and the sense of performance you could get just from doing a piece of artwork. But Sam started out as an actor. We're going to talk a little bit about more about him. But the maps are sort of a hallmark of his work at Disney that we all sort of know him by. Sam started out as an actor, little Sammy McKim, as a child actor. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. He was born in Vancouver and came to Hollywood and became a child actor. And I'd like to actually bring on another guest for us to talk a little bit about Sam and then talk about some of the other artists who contributed to all the maps of the Disney parks. Let's welcome our friend Matt McKim. Now, Matt is an Imagineer, the lighting designer at WDI, and he collaborates with team members during design and fabrication of lighting elements. And I remember running into you a couple months ago at WDI, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, it's shorter to tell you what I'm not doing. Because he was going from Shanghai to Hong Kong to Florida to somewhere else, doing all the lighting and installation for themed lighting in parks and resorts all over the world. We started Imagineering about the same time, 1987.
87, yeah.
And it's good that so far ahead in the future, we're still so damn good looking. So,
Some people think so.
but Matt is also a sculptor, a production designer, a very talented artist, a lighting designer, and contributing to projects, like I said, all over the world: Disneyland Paris, Indiana Jones, Toontown and Tokyo Disneyland, Pandora. Do you want to tell us the stuff you didn't work on? Was that faster?
You're doing a good job.
I unknowingly met Matt in 1987 or 86, first Disney Legends Award.
Yes.
At the studio. I posted a picture on Facebook of me at the first Disney Legends Award with Pluto. And Matt sends me a note and says, "Hey, you posted that picture of us." I didn't know he was inside the costume. So we go back a long way. But Matt, I think probably the greatest appreciator of Sam McKim is probably you. And so we've kind of brought you out to walk us through a little bit about the fun maps. And, well, I wanted to talk a little about Sam's movie career for a minute.
Oh, yes. So he actually had a career before he started at Disney.
And a pretty big career.
Actually, he did pretty well. In 1935, he was joining his grandfather to go visit a relative at MGM. And while he was there, a casting director walked in, and he said, "Hey, kid, don't I know you?" He says, "You're in pictures, right?" And my dad, at 11 years old, he doesn't know why he said it, but he said, "No, but I'd like to be." And so then there was history. The guy wrote a letter of introduction, and his first picture was a 1935 20th Century Fox, Jane Withers movie called This Is the Life. And he actually got a speaking role and got an extra $5 for the day. So back in 1935, that was pretty good.
A lot of fun.
Yes, when you consider what a steak dinner was back then. So anyways, he ended up working with a lot of the studios, and he ended up working with people like Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy,
Dave Cropper.
But it was interesting when you really think about who he worked with and rubbed shoulders with. And John Wayne, he made 3 pictures with John Wayne. And John said to my dad, he said, "We're not supposed to like to work with kids or animals." But he says, "I like working with you, Sammy." So, anyways, he was just, he was such a good-humored guy. I don't know how you did not enjoy being around him. But well, he was also dad, so there could be friction.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, this is interesting. So with all of this history of the movies, 1952 was the last picture that he made. And John Ford was a friend of his, and he said, "Sammy, I'm going to give you a good role." So he got the script and was fitted with the costume for The Long Gray Line with Maureen O'Hara and Tyrone Power. And he had gone in and got a job at 20th Century Fox in the art department under Lyle Wheeler, the big-time art director, Gone with the Wind and the like. And so my dad turned down John Ford. And John Ford wasn't in his office at the time. My dad brought back the script, and his assistant says, "You can't do that. Nobody turns down John Ford." Even John Wayne used to quiver around John Ford. So anyways, my dad said, "I'll be the first." And he said, "You don't realize I'm getting my dream. I'm going to be an artist." And so he went to work at 20th Century Fox. And the Christmas cards from John Ford ended. He never got another phone call. It was over. So
Betrayer.
yeah.
But you know what? I think he was smart. I think he's smart to go in a direction that made him satisfied and happy. And I think his work is all just imbued with he just loved what he's doing in artwork. And here we have, Vanessa, tell us what this one is. I think this is the one I have at home.
That's one of the first fun maps, 1958.
Was this the first
Yes.
that we know of? Yeah.
There were 3 versions though, right, Matt?
Yes. 3 for 1958. Orange border.
And then there's this one.
1962.
Blue border is 62, right? 61 is pink.
How many of you have this one? How many of you want this one? Vanessa, you've got extra ones in the art library you're giving away. This is like Oprah.
Well, I have one extra of one of them, but that's probably gonna go to Matt. He gets first dibs.
Now, this isn't Sam's. Sam stopped doing them, right? Or did
There was a pause.
there's a pause where he didn't?
He skipped a couple of fun maps. Do you know why that was?
Well, yes. So he was.
Is it a bad story?
No. It's a good story. So the first map, he started at the studio, and then the workload got heavy, so he took it home and was working on it in the evenings. And so he did the first map, he did all the versions, and on the original map, so it was pasted over the original. So all these iterations from 58 to 64 were pasted on top of the original.
That's why you don't have the pencil art that's a photograph
Very
of.
likely.
Because I remember asking about that at one point, and he said, "Oh, it got so many pastovers and stuff, I think I threw it away."
Well, 66 came around and the company said they wanted a clean map, start over fresh. And my
Right.
dad said, I'm teaching at Art Center, my workload's too much, I can't do it. So it went to Colin.
Colin Campbell.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the one I had when I was a kid from my first trip. I think the orange one. Thank you. Thanks, Mom. And then we moved into, and who does this?
Is that Charles Boyer?
70, this is
I
70.
think it might be Charles Boyer, but
You
we're
have
not
Big Thunder on the bottom?
100% sure. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, what,
So it-
79.
Charles Boyer worked at Disneyland all those years and did a lot of marketing art and other wonderful pieces for the park.
So it would make sense.
He did a lot of
Could
the
be.
limited editions and things like that. You've seen lots of Chuck Boyer's stuff. This is what, 87, right?
87.
And then we have,
This
oh,
is also
this
not
is,
the book.
what, to explain this one. This is amazing because I want it, even though it was never made.
You'll have to ask him.
Matt,
So,
you want to tell it?
Marty, you were probably involved in this too.
This
This was the 35th anniversary. Do you remember this?
I don't remember specifically
Okay.
this one.
30th
But
anniversary.
it was a fold-out. So
know,
very
like the
similar
book
to the
cover.
book. Pardon?
Like the book cover, the map.
Yes. So you would fold out a left side and then a right side, and you could see the map of yesterday and the map of today, and then there were references to what was coming.
And what had been.
I'm sorry?
And what had been.
And what had been.
Which, by the way, I think we should point out, Walt loved to talk about things that were coming. Even at first map, the 1958 map, it has a Liberty Street in it, it has an Edison Square in it off Main Street, and it had those kind of things where Walt loved to talk about what was coming, supposedly, and of course a lot of it got diverted to the New York World's Fair. And your dad, I remember the first time I met him, he was doing sketches for the pre-show for the Lincoln show for the New York World's Fair for Jim Alger, who was one of the producers at the studio. And he did, Sam did the whole pre-show, which originally was shown at Disneyland. And I'm sure a lot of you saw that at the time. Many sketches of Lincoln that were black and white, a lot of them were black and white, but a whole series leading up to Lincoln actually doing the performance of the show.
He was
And this
very
is-
proud of that.
He should have
Very
been.
proud of that.
But the map, I mean, it's interesting because when we started at WTI, of course, we were the generation that had grown up with fun maps, and now there was Tony Baxter and people like that who had grown up with fun maps. So they're working on projects that they want to keep going and doing more fun maps on. And this one is the line work for, which one is this? Nina
this is
Harris?
the first one Nina Ravon did for Disneyland.
Oh, that's Nina.
So this is 1995.
Nina Ravon.
We're skipping forward a little bit, yeah. So Nina took over the fun map tradition from Sam. I mean, Sam selected, she was taking art classes with him, is that right?
She had 2 of his classes up at Art Center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My God.
So they knew each other well.
So Sam passed the baton on to Nina. And she's
Yeah.
she's another amazing Imagineering artist.
Yes.
So this is the color,
This is
final.
the final color version, 40th anniversary.
I remember that one.
I have that one.
Quit bragging.
I have this one too.
And this is also mine.
Yes, also 9
Now, do you have this artwork? Do you
I
have?
do.
So it's, you have all of this preserved
Yes,
within the
yes.
collection as
And
well.
she painted the base art is the colored version, and then it has an overlay with the line work. And then there's another overlay with all the copy and the banners that goes on top of it.
Vanessa, I don't know if you talked about your archives there at Imagineering, and how many pieces of art you have originally, and how much digital work. Why don't you mention something about that?
So I think Jeff mentioned at the beginning, there's 130,000 pieces approximately in the collection.
So I think there's plenty for everyone.
When you
No.
So out of
Try, Jeff, you're in trouble. Security.
stop.
I come in and
Get off the
Vanessa says, "Oh," I'm like, "What?" She says, "Yesterday was take whatever you want day."
So out of that many pieces, about 80,000 is physical artwork. Everything else is digital, and a lot of what's being created now is done digitally. But there's still a handful of artists that will do, pencil drawings on tissue and then scan that and digitally color it. So we're still getting physical artwork in on a daily basis.
And preservation and curatorial work and all of that in all your spare time.
We do it all. We're a team of three.
Great.
3 people. Right now we have a few interns for the summer, which is fantastic. So we manage every aspect of the collection, and actually we just kicked off last week a major digitization project.
Say that real fast.
I hate that word. But so out of the 80,000 pieces of physical art, less than 2,000 have a high quality, color accurate, usable scan. So we're going back and pulling all of the artwork that does not have a nice file, and we're getting a gorgeous 500 megabyte color accurate file.
Yeah, this is like the bane of Vanessa's existence, is when she sees a presentation or a book or an article and she'll look at it and go, "That's color inaccurate. That's from an old transparency. That looks terrible."
Yes, we're
So
particular.
we like the passion. So the map tradition, of course, continued with the new park back in 2001. So what's this piece is
This is Rennie Rao Marquez. This is the base art for the Disney California Adventure.
and this is a painting.
It's a painting.
Painting.
Yes.
But it's like you said, it's got different layers, so there's,
Yeah. They digitally, the next one shows, they digitally went in and added the logo and some copy on top of it.
and then I have that one. I have the California Adventure one. And then this one is,
This one was a rougher fun map. It's not as finished. This was created specifically for use in the Blue Sky Cellar to showcase all the changes that were on their way to California Adventure.
and of course, when we went to Florida,
And this is Ray Cat, sorry, another great artist.
is Ray Cat here?
Ray.
Hi, Ray. So this piece,
Now we're moving away from Disneyland.
continue the tradition of fun map.
This
Different
is Paul
artist.
Hartley, and he started the studio in animation, and I worked with him quite a bit. He did the souvenir booklets, and also the wonderful book with all the kids in it from It's a Small World, the whole diversity of kids that we for years we had it as a poster outside of It's a Small World for every one of the small worlds around the world. That was all Paul Hartley's work. Wonderfully good.
Paul did a lot of publication design too. He designed the Art of Animation, the 1958 Art of Animation book. He designed Our Friend the Atom and a lot of those, and he did the Mickey Mouse Club and the Walt Disney magazines in the 50s and 60s. And I think he did some of the Vacation Land specialty art for Vacation Land magazine. He had a really wonderful graphic style, really bold. Did a lot of work on Walt Disney World. Tram cards and very much a graphic artist.
And you might mention that for most of these artists, this work was a side work. They were working on all the projects.
You're working on real things. This was the
Maps are real.
maps. No,
I don't think we should.
they're pretend.
I did want to say something. When you've got all the characters around the edge and everything, Marty, you were talking about collaboration. And with the first map that my dad did, 1958, he laid out all the characters around the edge and worked off of model and such. But Ken Peterson was the fellow at the studio that was overseeing all of this. And he said, well, you did a great job here with all the pencil work on the map and everything. He says, we're going to have others come in and work on this. And so Art Riley was actually the gentleman who did the color on that first map, the first one. And then Bill Justice, Ex Atencio, and then there were others. I think they had about 3 or 4 characters apiece. And they went in and actually did the finished characters around after my dad laid them out and such. So it was a collaboration.
And of course, this sort of continued this idea of the fun map goes all over. This is this actually isn't a for sale fun map. This is
created. It's on just the original art is hanging in Tokyo Disneyland in guest relations.
the original.
The original. So it was created as I guess sort of a prop almost or a decor.
And this was also Colin who had done the
Yes.
1960s.
You know, when I was looking through the book, which is fabulous, by the way, can you go back to that last one?
Can I go back to the last one?
Yep.
When I was looking through the book, I said, this is as good as any other piece of art in the whole book, I think.
Yeah.
Sam's original fun maps and this, I think, are for me, are the epitome of these maps that were done for the park. I really think that Colin did a fabulous job with this.
Now this is
Tokyo Disney Sea.
This is Nina.
Another Nina, 2001. This is her color comp or color study for the fun map. So it's really rough, but she's just figuring out what the color palette's going to be. And then there's the final. And another collaboration piece. So Nina did the main base art for it. Julie Svensson, another great artist, did the characters. And then Will Ironman was one of our graphic designers. He recently retired. He went in and added the logo and all the copy on top of it. And back to Sam.
And we've got a Sam again many, many years later. What's this is?
Now we're in
This is the
Disneyland.
Disney Paris. Yeah.
Yes. So this one this is the original ink work for it that we do have, and he drew it at full size. This is a big piece.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit bigger and then it was reduced. I don't know what the percentage of it was, but yeah, it's a big piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was the last time map that he did.
Yes. And Steve Cargyle did the characters around the
Yes.
border.
Collaboration.
Another Nina.
Yes. Nina again. And this one's for Hong Kong.
And like you said before, Sam knew Nina, taught Nina, and then really sort of put her into the role of the map maker.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to see she kept his style, and she even put his initials in the first fun map that she did.
That's very kind of her.
So I think the fun maps are so completely fascinating. Of course, that's because I was a nerd kid with fun maps. So I know this might surprise you horribly, but Marty Sklar is actually in demand for another panel. He has little of interest to say to any of us who are fans, but apparently they would like you to go and do the Imagineering Legends panel. So we're going to say goodbye to Marty, and thank you